Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan. We're so glad that you're in the audience today, whether you're watching this as it goes out live on Wednesday, June 12th, or if you're watching it in the Atlanta station, or you're listening to it as a podcast. We're really happy that you decided to join us as an audience.
Yes, and I want to remind everybody, Thursday nights, WDJY.com. That's the FM radio station, 99.1 FM in Atlanta. You can listen to our shows there every Thursday night at 9 o'clock Eastern. Saturdays, every Saturday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, episode Rewind. We also replay a lot of the old episodes that we have. And then next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, you'll watch again, probably a pre-recorded show. So, because we're going to be traveling, but don't miss them. They're all insightful authors. And
we'll be in Gettysburg.
Yeah, we'll be up in Gettysburg.
So. And we may do a live stream, so keep tuned.
Yeah.
Because we'll do a Haunted Campfire Tale podcast.
Keep watching this on Facebook. So, what else is new? Anything?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. We happen to have a guest tonight who's talking to us from North Georgia, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And would you like to introduce him?
Yes. All right. Without further ado, let's bring on Dr. Bruce Farmer. Hello.
Hi, Bruce.
Hi.
How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a 71-year-old guy who was raised as an Army brat by a colonel in the Army, and we kind of traveled the world. And ultimately, my mom decided that Oregon would be a place to retire. And so we settled there in 1966, 67. And so I was pretty much, in the last 50 years, have been living in Oregon. I went to high school, Sunset High School, and then got an honors degree in biology at PSU, and then went into medical school. And graduated from medical school in 83 and went into a surgical residency and spent a great amount of time in the burn unit and in the trauma ICU. So the action that takes place in the book, some have mentioned that it's clear that the author knows his way around an intensive care unit, and you spend hours and hours and hours in the ICU, and it's all life and death. So I did that, and ultimately went out and practiced emergency medicine, and then finished my career up as a family practice doc in a small rural area in Oregon. And then I had this yearning, whatever, to go to seminary, not because I wanted to be a pastor, but I'm philosophically driven, and I've always been just wondering, how do you reconcile biological determinism or God's sovereignty and free will? How does that work? How is that possible? So I went to seminary to study philosophical theology and wrote a thesis addressing that issue. And ultimately, my back really went out. I had surgery. I came back to Oregon, and I started a company for rehabbing severely injured backs, Fitness Therapeutics, and really connected with the physical therapy department at Oregon Health Sciences University. And I had developed a CD-ROM with all of the exercises, everything, and they loved it. So we spent years getting this ready, applying for grants and everything. And then the grant did not come through. And it leaves you high and dry because you've invested your life, your soul into this business with all these promises. And then suddenly, boom, there you are. And that is what led me into really to take on writing full time, ironically enough. I got the idea, the vision for Blood Sapphire's Revenge back in the year 2000 when I entered seminary. And I was, you read everything in the original languages, you're kind of steeped in kind of the nitty-gritty history of the time and the ages. And I was reading the book of Esther about, really, Hadassah is her name. And here is this beautiful queen. And I believe that she was a very wise woman. There are more reasons that the Persian king, ruler of the universe at that time, I think it was Artaxerxes, chose her. I mean, she's beautiful, but he saw something in her that was above and beyond physical appearance. And not knowing that she was Jewish, and her uncle Mordecai said, Esther, Hadassah, don't tell anyone. She went, okay. So the plot goes on, and then as it turns out, there's an enemy of the Jews, Haman the Agathite, which goes back again thousands of years, centuries old. These quarrels, these feuds, and he says, "I want to kill the Jews, king. I'll put money in the treasury to get rid of them." And as the story goes, Mordecai tells Esther, if you don't say something, your race, your people are on the line. And she says, well, look, no one can just go into the king's chamber without being summoned. If you do, you're dead. And he said, well, maybe you were born for such a time as this. And that for me is one of the themes of Blood Sapphire's Revenge. Because what I saw in that story was this question: what would happen if we took this 5th century Persian queen and transported her into our time and made her a spec ops elite sniper in the Israeli Defense Force? And people have gone, well, how did you make that connection? And I can say, I have no idea. That's just artistic, whatever. I just thought of it and went, what happens if she's put in the same position that ultimately at some point in the book, she must, and in fact, in the book, she gets a call from the director of the Mossad who says, there is a man who is developing nuclear-tipped rockets, and he's firing them into Jerusalem, and we think 2 days from now. We still don't know where he is, but we know he knows where you are because we've watched him try and capture you and track you down. He has something against you. And she says, yeah, so what? Well, when he comes after you, we will be waiting. And she says, you mean I'm the sacrificial goat? And he says, well, there are worse things, but perhaps you were born for this moment, to step up and do something that you never thought of. And I feel that that call is something that is a call, is a very human call that all of us, wherever we are, ask the questions, am I being called to step beyond myself and do something? Maybe that's why I was born. So that's one of the themes. So I had this vision around 2000 about this thing happening. I started writing, and then I put the book down. A couple of years go by, I start writing, put it down, pick it up, put it down. Well, by 2016, Fitness Therapeutics went bust. And I was going, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with my life? And it's a funny thing. I was going to an Anglican church, and Father Lilligard, I asked him, I said, I need some advice here. He said, well, maybe you need to see a counselor. Like you go to the priest for this, special wisdom. And he says, hey, go see a counselor. And I've always had a fascination, more than a fascination, but a real interest in the writings and teachings of Carl Jung, the who founded analytic psychotherapy. And he and Sigmund Freud introduced psychology into the 20th century. And we are, one way or another, it's Freud or Jung. And I went, well, I think I'm going to see a Jungian psychotherapist to ask this, to investigate this. And I flipped through and I found this gal who's a senior counselor through the Jungian Society, trained in Switzerland, Martha Blake, and showed up. And the thing is, I had a dream. Now, if you know anything about Carl Jung, he interpreted over 80,000 dreams. Mm-hmm. He's the master of dream interpretation. That's his life. So when you mention to a Jungian that you have a dream, it's like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Well, sit up straight. I've got my pen, my paper. What is your dream? And I said, well, I was in this dream. I saw a figure who looked like Robert Frost with the gray beard, the whole thing. And he was laying on his back underneath this beautiful, cold, clear mountain stream that was tumbling down the mountain side. And he was on his back and it was over him. He couldn't breathe. And worse, it was iced over. And it was clear he wanted to get out, but he couldn't. And then it's like light started to dawn, but it was moonlight. So Martha looked at me and said, well, first of all, have you ever written poetry? I said, well, back in high school, but once I made the decision to go to medicine, 50 years, that's all I've done is science. She says, well, with Jung, you have in essence been living under the sun, in the sunlight, doing the work that provides for your family. You've been working in medicine. But poetry and art doesn't take place under the sun. It takes place in the moonlight. And she said, have you been writing at all? And I said, well, it's interesting you ask. I mean, I actually started writing a little bit more on this book that I had in mind. She said, well, it's very possible that there's a poet in you who wants to get out. And the edges are thawing, and your subconscious, the deep part of yourself is whispering to you, hey, maybe it's time to walk away from the sunlight and start living in the moonlight. And I went, wow, that was really amazing. And it was so, it really was an amazing insight. And I put away everything and I picked up this manuscript and I started writing. And Blood Sapphire's Revenge is the result of that 2016 encounter with this gifted Jungian counselor.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Plus,
And
Robert Frost is my favorite poet.
oh, yeah. I mean, it's just interesting how these images and how the unconscious knows, even though we don't know, it knows, and it tries to communicate to us. So I banged around. You know, I've lived in a lot of places. I'm someone who's always been an outdoors person, and my dad was raised me to be outdoors. I was skiing in the Sierra Nevadas at a very young age, and pretty soon in high school raced and always hiked, and until finally we'd hiked around Mount Hood so many times in junior high and high school that finally we said, maybe we should climb it. So we started climbing it, and one thing leads to another, and you've climbed Hood 4 times, or you've climbed Adams 8 times, and you've done Mount Rainier. You've done all of these Cascade Mountains. You've skied off of some of them, but I love mountaineering, and there's something just very special when you're just one foot after another and you're asking yourself, why am I doing this to myself? But it's wonderful to get to the top of a mountain. And I love skiing, especially steep stuff. I go to where it's steep and go, okay, we've got something here we can work with. And I like rafting. And let's see, 3 years ago, long kind of dream came true. I had a chance to raft down the Colorado River, 2-week rafting, which was amazing. 18-foot standing wave.
Did you go through the canyon?
Oh, yeah. You started. Yeah, that's right.
Quite a different look up than it is.
Yeah, different viewpoint.
I like looking up better than I like looking down. You feel the majesty of
to be in the canyon for 2 weeks. There's no cell phones, no nothing. You are in what is called canyon time.
Yeah.
The guides call it, you're in canyon time now. You can't communicate. It's just you and this canyon and the enormous amount of history. And every time you look sideways, there are rapids. They had to develop a different classification for rapids because these rapids are so big. Anyway, I digress. So that's a little bit, I have 3 wonderful kids. John's, they're anyway, great kids. And, I could talk about them and the grandkids, but we'll just say great. That's all wonderful.
Well, we need to take our first break. And
believe it or not,
when we come back, maybe you indicated you wanted to read a little bit out of your book, and maybe we can start out doing that.
All righty.
Folks, there's a lot more to come.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Yep.
It's every parent's worst nightmare. Police officer Madison Jackson awakes to discover her baby kidnapped from her crib. Was it revenge for someone she arrested, or something far more sinister? Madison's estranged husband is incarcerated in Supermax. As the second in command of a deadly Mexican cartel, did he issue the order to abduct their daughter? Bye, Baby, Bye, from author Kelly Marshall. Get your copy today.
Many secrets are hidden within the darkness of the jungle. Now comes part 4 in the Jaguar series by retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. In this saga, Brandon, Andrea, and Naja, the Black Jaguar, go deep into the Mato Grosso jungle on a mission to rescue 2 kidnapped children. During their journey, they encounter many dangers, including Yanomami Indians, bent on revenge for the murder of one of their warriors.
Return of the Jaguar is book 4 in the Jaguar series, starting with 2 faces of the Jaguar, the Lost City, and the Jaguar's Quest. All 4 are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other bookseller websites worldwide. Return of the Jaguar is a must-read.
Profiteers are preying on displaced souls who seek freedom, sacrificing everything. Wanting to give their children hope and a future, but they wrongly trust on a roll of loaded dice. Teens are picked off and sold into slavery. Cartels offer the choice to strong young men to move illegal drugs over the border or die. The R Group and CATS team leaders want to end Mateo's inhuman business model. The heroes must derail the human exploitation and opioid epidemic, killing people in increasingly dramatic numbers. If they can save even a few from the jaws of death, they win. The present-day battle is in full swing, yet it can end badly for humanity unless the Enigma heirs triumph. Who will survive the onslaught, and how fast can they make Mateo pay?
And we're back. Those were some good commercials.
All right. So you want to read for us?
Sure.
You want to set the stage first, a little bit?
Yes. Blood Sapphire's Revenge. We have a very Staff Sergeant Hattie Abrams is one of the finest snipers in the world, and she's called upon to eliminate a Al-Qaeda terrorist in Yemen. She makes an incredible shot, not knowing that in taking this guy out, she has put herself on a path. There's a man called X, a Ukrainian oligarch who he's Jewish, but he hates his people. He wants to destroy them. When he finds out what has happened to his golden boy, he sets his enforcer out to get Hattie. And not knowing, now there's another thing, Hattie herself is really, she's been struggling with issues of suicide all her life. There's a deep current of nihilism in her life. She's very philosophical. So she has decided to kill herself when this op is over. She's taking herself out. As it turns out, she is prevented at the last second from doing so. And she feels like, in essence, God has kind of intervened. And now she's kind of back at base going, wow. And she's invited out to go dancing with this, hunky guy. And in the process, a jihadi blows up the place. And the last we see of Hattie is she's being blown up against a wall, knocked into unconsciousness, And 3 days later, she wakes up in the intensive care unit. And her face has been badly, badly injured, shredded. She goes through all of this thing asking, essentially, God, how could you do this? How is this possible? And then she discovers that someone is out to get her. She has no idea who it is. And so she goes on the run. She says, I don't know about what is happening, but I've got to escape. So she goes on this venture to escape, save her life, and in the process keeps getting pushed back to her destiny, which is to meet X, the man who we find out killed her father 27 years ago.
Wow.
So she's been looking for X, didn't know who he was. X been looking for her, and now they're set on this collision course. So this is halfway. This is in the ocean. She's, this begins the Mitsubishi Ramon Special Operations Base in the Sinai Desert. It's Israel, Monday, October the 9th, 0400 hours, and it's at 4 a.m., and we find her getting ready to escape this special ops base. She's been put there for her protection, and now she's figuring a way to get out of there because she believes I'm not even safe here. So she ends up going down to Ashdod, the port of Ashdod, and she said, hidden behind the aviators and inhaling the bracing early morning breeze, Hattie strolled down the walkway. She walked to the end of each pier, examining a four-masted clipper ship, schooners, and yachts. As sunlight flickered off the polished hulls, she noticed a shiny white cruiser at the end of the last pier. The gulls were calling and diving when she heard noise behind her. An army vehicle had scrunched to a halt. Soldiers hopped out, intent on a search. Damn it, that was fast, she said. Hattie hastened to the low-slung, sleek cruiser. Gold letters on the stern announced Austria, Roma, Italy. 50 feet long, trimmed in blue, gold, and teak, the boat bobbled in the waves with a tied-down mast. The rig looked like a modified cigarette racer. A rigid inflatable raft with a 60-horsepower Yamaha outboard laid lashed to the back with a small winch. No bikini-clad women or men in wide-brim hats or bright Hawaiian shirts lounged on the roof. Two roughnecks manhandled small wooden crates into the hold. They worked noiselessly, focused on the job at hand. Hattie glanced over her shoulder at two soldiers talking to a yacht owner 2 piers away. She stopped at the Astria's gangplank and addressed a swarthy, 40-ish barrel-chested man with a tangle of eyebrows. A cigarette dangled from his lower lip. Hattie adjusted her voice and asked innocently, "Are you going to Rome?" He gave her a quick glance. "No tourists here," he replied brusquely. His partner, a young, muscled seaman, pushed past him. "We port in Civitavecchia on the coast," he said with eager eyes. "Rome's inland." Hattie watched him stare at her figure greedily as he continued, "Where's your family?" "In Florence, but I want to spend time in Rome," she said. The seaman's teeth flashed. He said quickly, "Talk to Captain Dimas. He's in the wheelhouse," and stepped aside to let her by. As she ducked into the wheelhouse, she overheard the older man growl, "Get your head out of your pants and get back to work." And Hattie glanced back and saw the young seaman making curves in the air. And so she ends up talking with the captain and ends up being taken aboard the Astria, and off they go into the ocean, into the sea. And above deck, the seaman released the ropes. Now there's another person on board, another third seaman, and we'll meet him in a moment. And the skipper engaged the engines. The ship shuddered. Hattie had a passing knowledge of cigarette racers, and they sounded like twin Mercs. She recalled each engine churned out between 1350 and 1550 horsepower, depending on the racing fuel. The captain swung the Astrea to open sea and opened the throttles. The propellers responded like thoroughbreds at the starting gate. The gleaming hull skimmed off the 1-foot swells. Hattie locked the cabin door and tossed the satchel on the floor. Big business, my ass, said Hattie to herself. Drug runners, more like it. And she heard her best friend in the back of her mind say, "You're on the run, thumbing a ride with scum. Be careful, sis. I'm not there to watch your six." So they move down, they continue, and she knows she's in danger. It's 3:00 in the morning the next day, and the Astrea floated quietly while Hattie slept with one eye open. At 3 a.m., the engines gurgled and the lights of the port city faded from her window. Hungry, she stole into the galley. The wheelhouse door lay ajar, and she overheard the captain say, "The syndicate won the bid." And the seaman replied in tandem, "How much?" $48,000. But when Piaro sees her, "I think more," said Captain Dimas. "We'll take her tonight in Marsala. Warn Xuthus, no touching." A cold wave of fear spiraled down Hattie's spine. She crept back to the stateroom. She practiced breathing, calmed down, but her stomach continued to growl for food. An hour passed, and Hattie opened the door. The engines roared and the waves splashed as the boat sliced through the water. She steadied her movements against the bouncing by keeping her hands on the wall. Cool air met her face. The odors of food and carnauba wax mixed together. She touched her Glock and the knife tucked in her waistband. A single light cast a dim glow over the stove in the narrow, deserted galley. Balancing herself, Hattie planted her feet on the tiled floor as the vessel bounced and swayed. She filled a bowl with stew and tossed in a loaf of bread. Hattie heard a rustling behind her and whipped around. Xuthus had the same idea of an early morning snack, and in the soft light, Hattie's silhouette stood out. The big man downshifted the first gear. His motion slowed as two small eyes fixed themselves on the woman like lasers. He put down his plate, the size of a tea saucer, in his hand, and stepped towards her, mesmerized by this shiny toy. Xuthus reached out, his fingers inches from Hattie's face, and speaking in a high-pitched cat-like meow, said, "Let me pet your hair." Hattie instinctively sidestepped and bumped against the stove. Her right hand went to the pistol while the other pushed the lion's paw aside. "Not today, big fella, or ever," she said. Xuthus' eyes hardened and his voice darkened. "I want to pet it." And with surprising quickness, the giant stretched out his arms like albatross wings and boxed her in. He towered over her. "The captain won't hear. Don't scream like the others." Hattie's chest seized in panic. Her body became mush as her worst fear materialized like a ghost ship from the fog. The Glock had no legs. The knife had no hands. Xuthus squealed in the light and put his palm on her head. Then he grabbed one breast. And like a magician's fire, Hattie's rape flashed up. She was falling under blows from long ago, tied up and spread open for this giant. The claustrophobia clamped down her throat. Xuthus touched her pelvis. Suddenly, in her chest, Hattie felt the fiery lightsaber come alive and an inner voice say, "When you hear the blast of war, summon your rage and strike like a tiger." Like an explosion from a cannon, Hattie's hand shot out, aiming for the back of Xuthus' throat. Her fingers sliced through his skin like a paper bag. They stopped at the spinal cord. On their way out, the fingers snapped shut like a bear trap and ripped out the windpipe, arteries, veins, and all. Blood sprayed like water from fire hydrants over the ceiling and walls of the galley. Xuthus turned pale, his eyes glazed over. The giant toppled like a redwood and landed on the floor with a loud crash. A pool of dark blood spread out beneath the Leviathan as the skipper rushed in and yelled for his mates. And we'll stop right there.
Wow. If that doesn't make you want to read the book, nothing will.
0 to 60 there.
I know. That was intense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really intense. Good writing. Good story.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
I like
it. Every page, she's dodging something and taking my cue from Susan Atwood, the very famous author, says, you take your character and you push them and push them and put them in every position. And when things are at their very worst, you push them over the cliff. And that is, Hattie Abrams goes through hell to finally end up completely spent, toasted, of no strength, when she gets this call that she's supposed to go find X. And she says, you've got the wrong person. I have no strength left. I've been on the run. Someone else. And the other thing that's going on in this book is there's a love interest. And 9 years earlier on Mount Rainier, she was climbing the mountain. She was coming down from the mountain, and another guy, Liam Wolf James, was in the Rangers, and he has now retired, but he's climbing Mount Rainier, and they're climbing past each other, and their eyes lock for a moment, and they know beyond knowing that they're meant for each other. And Wolf searches for 9 years to find her and can't, and finally decides to give up. He has gone into sketching charcoals. He burns everything up except 3 sketches, and he falls in love with someone else. And as it turns out, Wolf is sent to Odessa, Ukraine for a spec ops mission. And sure enough, Hattie herself is sent to Odessa, Ukraine. And you know they're going to come together. And that chapter is, anyway, so once they get together, they know their target is X. And then the book really gets going.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's time for our second break.
Yeah.
Our last break.
Break.
Don't go away. We're going to talk about what's coming down the pike here for Hattie.
And I'm going to tell you how to get in touch with
There you go.
Dr. Farmer.
There you go. So everybody stay tuned. Don't go away.
An unforgettable mystery thriller that will transport you back to 17th century England. Introducing Dream of Courage, facing fear head-on, your passport to 17th century mystery, mayhem, and murder. Follow Robert and John Rushworth through Leeds' bustling Brigade District, where danger lurks in the shadows, embodied by the thief-taker Jacob Wilding. You will laugh, you will cry, and be in awe of the twists and turns. Its meticulous attention to character development, emotional nuance, and the unfolding of the story's layers promise a compelling and emotionally charged journey. The U.S. National Times said, modern writers usually don't know what it was like to live in the past, but Rushworth Brown does this with great skill. Uncover the secrets of Smythe, the enigmatic tavern keeper who sends Robert to the Haven, to the pirate Captain Girlington. Will he outweed danger in the nick of time?
It's 1919, and Eric Laska returns from the war in Europe. 2 new enemies await him in the small coal mining town he calls home. One is a threat to his relationship with Rebecca, the love of his life. The other, a bloodthirsty beast, is stalking the mining town residents. The townspeople suspect Eric of one of the killings. An old man and Rebecca's 11-year-old sister have seen the beast, but only Eric believes their story. To protect the town and clear his name, he's forced to prove the werewolf exists. Available on Amazon. The Horror Within. by Marjorie Swift Doring.
Paradise, my prison. Charlie Flint awakens from a deep sleep and finds himself alone on a tropical beach surrounded by a palm tree jungle and exotic animals. He cannot remember who he is or anything about his life. First, he must find food and build shelter and protect himself from hidden dangers. As his memory gradually returns, it reveals what a very flawed person he is. A man who made too many mistakes, made too many enemies. The implications of the truth are staggering. How did Charlie get there? And will he save himself? Paradise, My Prison is the riveting new suspense thriller from retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. Paradise, My Prison by George Dismukes is available in jacketed hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats worldwide.
And we're back.
We are.
Let me see. Let me bring up. Yeah. Let people know how to get in touch with you and how to find all of your social media contacts. You can go to his website, drbrucefarmer.com, and that's DRBRUCEFARMER. And you can find everything that you're on, right? Facebook, TikTok.
Yes, I have a pretty active Instagram account. A lot of I'm on those threads, and there's quite a fun community on Instagram. Yeah.
Good.
So you can find me there. I think it's at drbrucefarmer.com, and then you come on and ask me questions or whatever. I'm more than happy to, try and answer. And the other thing, though, that I wanted to mention is that the book takes place over 26 days. That's when her 27th birthday is on October the 13th. And everything is coming down to that moment because X has decided to release these rockets on October the 13th. So from the get-go, there are 26 days. Her plot to kill herself has been thwarted. She's on the run, but that there's going to be this moment. At the same time, there are other characters that I have really enjoyed working with, and that's Professor Francois Lecomte, who is the nuclear genius who puts together the plutonium, bombs, and he's a Nobel Prize winning theorist and could care less about politics or anything else. He's just fascinated with the physics of it. And in order to get him off track, X hires, through the enforcer, a hooker, the finest escort in Moscow, named Brianna Ivanova, who's from the Lomonosov University and Russian literature and Shakespeare. And her job is to seduce him and get him away from anything having to do with this nuclear stuff. And as it turns out, they have a meeting. She knows her job is to seduce him, in essence, put him in the hands of the enforcer so that he's no longer in danger and everything. The problem is, when she meets him in Beirut, the rooftop bar, she immediately realizes he's drop dead gorgeous and he's fascinating, and she starts to fall for him when she shouldn't be. And she realizes she's caught in an impossible love. She has to seduce him, but she can't. And then the tables are turned when Francois, at the end of this evening, she says, "So let's go to my bedroom, to the hotel." And he says, "No, I'm not going to do it." She can't believe it. She says, "Well, what do you mean? I mean, her fish is getting out of," and he says, "Look, I don't know you're incredible, but there's something not right about all of this. And so I'm going to say no. And she's totally freaked out. And so that story gets developed. There's that thing going on. And which is another backstory. X himself has been called, I don't know who's the guy, I'm blanking on his name, the terrible guy that we associate with Jodie Foster and so in the movie.
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, Hannibal Lecter. Some reviewers have said, X is this decade's or this century's Hannibal Lecter. He has photographic memory. He never forgets anything. He's an oligarch, a billionaire. He can do pretty much whatever he wants, but he is one strange character, and the enforcer is even worse. So we've got and so there are plots within subplots. We find out that the enforcer wants to kill X. Then we find out that there's all sorts of things going on. So over a 26-day period, the way the book is written, each day 1, day 2, day 3, takes place in 4 different areas, either in Odessa, Ukraine, Tel Aviv, or New York City, Manhattan, or in Russia, in Donbas, Russia. And so events are taking place, and at first it all seems kind of disparate, but as the days get down, everything starts to come together. And so it becomes, that's where I think it becomes a steamroller.
So let me ask you this, because I know that if we had a live audience, someone would definitely, Joe Conjal, ask you this. And if you don't understand, we can explain. Are you a pantser or a plotter? Do you know those terms?
A pantser or a plotter?
Okay, a plotter is a person who has an outline of the story. This is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end. And they
I can answer that real quickly.
The pantser flies to the seat of their pants and writes the story as they go along.
Yeah, I'm always amused by Louis L'Amour, the famous Western author, who was feverishly typing over his typewriter, and his granddaughter came in one day and said, "Grandpa, why are you typing? What's going on in the book?" And he says, "I don't know yet. I'm trying to find out." That's kind of how I start. I have a basic idea of what I want to do, but I end up in places where I never thought I would end up. I let the character kind of push the action so that it's real. It has to, I like to be very grounded. The readers of this book will recognize that the Macmillan, TAC 50 sniper rifle is down to the pounds and inches, and everything about it is, her sniper shot is legendary. All of those things are very technical but grounded. So I let the character push the envelope, but I keep the characters grounded in the real world.
Okay. Well, we have about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you got on the drawing board there with Fury?
Well, the Blood Sapphire's revenge ends with everything comes down to the last second. X has his hand on a trigger that will release these rockets down to the last second. And in that last second, maybe I shouldn't give it away, but Hattie and Wolf show up. Okay, they show up. Blood Sapphire's Fury starts there. It starts where revenge ends. It's like they're just one continuous story. So Fury is these two who now have discovered another one of X's direst deeds and secrets. He has a partner whom we will find out about, who has purchased a spliced virus, a Hanta. It's a combination of 3 of the most virulent viruses: smallpox, Hanta, and I think Marburg. And it's basically Armageddon. This thing gets released, it's toast. And they discover that virus is in the hands of this other guy. And now the race is on to find him before that virus can be sold on the open market. But unbeknownst to them, there's a very powerful man in Russia who also finds out about this virus. And there's another person here and there. There are people who suddenly are very aware of these 10 vials of this virus. And now if the race is on to get that virus. And essentially you can extort nations. You can say to any nation, one vial can destroy New York City. And in fact, these new viruses that are being spliced together, their power and potency is beyond belief. So you can really hold hostage the president of the United States or anyone. And so they're all vying for it. And there's Hattie and Wolf, and they're going to stop this. So that's her fury.
That's very exciting. And I have to say that both books are very timely, and what their content is and what they're talking about is very on point for what we're living through now. Well, I mean, we've just come through COVID, so we all understand.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when people get into Blood Sapphire's Revenge, they realize that Wolf, who's he's a master sergeant in the Rangers, and now is an NYPD officer. He was born in Odessa, Ukraine. So he is Ukrainian. And it turns out that Hattie herself was born in Odessa, but she came into Manhattan as a baby. So there's a lot of, now some have said, well, how did you come up with Ukraine? I mean, do you realize what's going on here? And I said, I got this thing years ago, but we have 2 Ukrainians who are fighting for the survival of the world. Because once X does his deeds, it'll plunge everything into chaos. So it's interesting how that works.
Yeah. And like I said, very timely. Both books couldn't have done it better.
That's right. That's right. Really good. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Nope. I think we're pretty well done.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you have anything else you need to talk about?
I'm just so thankful to have been asked to be here, and just love writing, and just keep writing. I have hit the writer's block. I mentioned that earlier before we came on, that there is a character in Blood Sapphire's Fury that I'm developing, and I've done a lot of research. Faulkner said that you spend he spent 24 hours of research to write 3 hours of text. And that's pretty much true. Yeah. I've spent all this time on this character for Finland, which was right next to Russia. And of course, the action will be taking place in Russia because the head of Russia wants this virus. And so I chose Finland as kind of that's the point where this woman will find this woman, this Finnish gal, who's an expert hacker, and she's got grit. But I've got there's more going on in her, and I haven't found it yet. So everything stopped.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure she's not finished. So
no. No,
You'll find your.
I saw
Might
this
have
as a
another dream.
trilogy. I saw the book, these as a trilogy after the Millennium
Yeah.
trilogy after Lisbeth Salander. Yeah.
We'll look forward to it, and maybe once you get closer on Fury, we'll have you back on and we can talk some more.
Yeah,
All
when you're
right.
getting to
Yeah.
launch
Thanks so much.
you
Sounds
can come
really
back
good.
on. We'll help launch it.
All right.
Yeah. We're going to move you over to the
Thanks.
side. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
Bruce.
you.
Okay.
And let's see. Is there anything else you want to
No,
share with anybody?
I don't
Okay.
think so. I think we're all set.
Reminder, Thursday nights, WDJY.com, 99.1 FM Atlanta. You can actually listen www.wdjy.com. You can listen to their shows there, or you can listen to it just like old timey on the FM radio, 99.1 FM. So you can do all that. And then let's see here, Saturday, 5:30 p.m. Episode rewind, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, and next Wednesday, 7 o'clock, right here, right where you're watching right now, for both episode rewind and our show on Wednesday nights.
Yep.
All right. So I would say then, until next time.
That's all, folks. Good
Night.
night.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen G's welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie. And you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE-DV